Okay. Let's see how this sounds. Let's crank it all the way up. Um, how's this? Okay, I'm going to try and talk clearly with my funny hat. Okay, so let's get started. I'll keep this brief because um, I do have to do some work. But there have been a lot of I don't know, Twitter Spaces and videos and different takes lately on how to get a job in tech, and I disagree somewhat with basically all of them. I think there's an unspoken aspect, um, and I'm not sure why it's being danced around. Uh, you can see some of my videos on my YouTube channel from a long time back. I do not agree with like take home tests and like whiteboard tests, generally speaking. I don't agree with leak code grinding. I think those are terrible. No, uh, those are bad ways of gauging whether someone's going to be good at working, you know, with you, with your developers in your company, tackling problems. The reason why is, um, first of all, I think it's a huge coping mechanism by employers who do not know how to otherwise gauge a developer's abilities. And I think, in fairness, a lot of employers have been burned by developers who say they can do something, they get employed, and then they can't actually deliver. And so I get it. There's like a kind of a backlash by employers on the process that they want to hire with, that they want to follow to hire people. So I understand that, but it's still a cope. It's a lazy way out, figuring out who you would want to hire or not. And there's a reason I'm saying this. Um, I find it's also on the developer side, it's also disrespectful of their time. If I call a plumber to come fix a plumbing issue at my house, I would not ask them to prove to me that they can fit together two pipes and glue it and, you know, demonstrate that they know how pipes work before they do the job. There's a certain level of just treat people like adults and have faith that if you're going to call a plumber, they have a history. It's in their best interest to make sure they do the job right, so that they have more jobs, so that you'll call them again and tell your friends and so on. And it's unlikely that someone has gone through such effort to um, you know, pretend that they're a plumber when they're not. Now that is a lot easier to do, to pretend when you're online and saying you're a developer. You can pretend more, so I get that. But still, for what you're demonstrating is that you come in with no trust. Okay, so like it's nice to say these things, but then like what's the answer? So here's what I think the answer is. I don't think the answer is late code. I don't think the answer is whiteboard. I don't think the answer is doing like 3 to 6 interview processes. I don't think the answer is jumping through all these hoops. I think the answer is leaning into harder things. Now, some people will say it's networking, right? It's just in this economy, it's all about networking and who you know. The problem with networking is you you're not always going to be successful, or maybe you just don't have the social ability to go and talk to people and network the way that would benefit you. Lots of developers can't do that. So The entire premise, oh, just network and get to know people, does not always fit within a person's abilities and their world. The one thing that all, all at least half decent developers or developers who have been in it for a while, one thing that we all have in common is that we like what we do. So why not lean into that? So instead of interviewing based on, arbitrary tests that are obfuscated coping mechanisms across the board, what if both employers and potential employees, programmers, developers like you and I, expected harder processes? Let me clarify what I mean. What if instead of, let's say you're a junior, right? And you need some experience. And so you start up a GitHub account and you open up a few repositories. You want to tackle a few projects because you want to demonstrate that, you know something about programming. So what projects do you take? Well, you might start with FizzBuzz, or you might do something that's a bit simpler, or along the lines of FizzBuzz simple. But why? Why don't you look at tackling the hardest problem you can think of from the get-go? The point is not whether you successfully solve the problem in a particular language or framework. The point is that you tried and you learned along the way. And then on the employer side, instead of asking for predetermined questions like LeetCode mechanisms and principles you can remember, and then you can get past the questions you're expecting if you remember the LeetCode principles, but that doesn't mean that you know when to use those principles in an actual application of work. But if an employer was to look at your GitHub repositories, just as an example, but this could come in many different shapes, and they saw one person who has, FizzBuzz and a to-do app and, all the starter apps that we all like to start with. And then they look at person number 2 and they tackled a seriously complex problem that they have no hope of actually solving, but they tried. Which one would you be more inclined to at least consider? And then what you could do in the interview process as the employer is say, hey, tell me about this project you did. And then you can see whether a person is passionate about the problem they tried to solve, especially if it's a complicated one. And they can talk about it. You can drill down into, nitty-gritty technical details. How did you do this? What did you try with that? What made you choose this problem? What made you choose that approach? Whatever the case is, right? You can do a form of technical interview by talking about the problem that was attempted to be solved between employer and a potential employee and employer. So I think the point is that we try and take the easy route out of a problem. And the problem is, well, developers pretend a lot, and then employers, don't know how to ask the right questions, and yada yada yada, and the interview process is broken, and so on. But what if we tried to do harder problems by default? What if that was the expectation of any developer? They should have at least one GitHub repository that tried to solve a very complex problem. And you know what? Within that complex problem, there's probably some kind of LeetCode type subterrane that was attempted, even by a junior developer. You get the best of every world. And you can also do an interpersonal engagement as well, because it's not just about the technical. When you're asking somebody about a problem they tried to solve, you can see how they, articulate themselves, how they talk, how personable are they, how willing are they to, get in, dive deep, how much do they actually know about the problem that they attempted to solve. You can build a rapport. Like, there's a lot of, just outside of technical, there's a lot of interpersonal that you can also get from, and it's just one stream. It's one problem, one stream that tells you many things along the way. Yes, it's a more complicated problem like we're everybody has to tackle a bigger burden, yes, but I think that's the way out of the broken technical processes. And what's more, if you are a person who needs to network for whatever reason, having a complicated project that you attempted to do and you can talk about passionately, and you can say like, hey, I didn't solve it, but like I tried something cool. Those kinds of things get attention, which you can use to network more than I've done like 30 repos with like to-dos and fizzbuzz. It seems like a win across the board to me, but we have to be willing to set those expectations and work with them. It's like, instead of the easy way out, let's lean into the hard way out, and just like lean into that a lot. One of my GitHub repositories is something that I tried to do that I knew I could not properly solve. I wrote a Node.js service that works Mac, Linux OS, or Windows, sorry, Mac, Linux, Windows. It starts up an FFmpeg server. It captures your screen. Then you can run a central Node.js service so that it can listen to multiple machines. So I had like a Raspberry Pi, I had my Windows, I had my Mac, all running screenshot captures. The individual node services beside FFmpeg also could listen to keyboard and mouse. And then my central one could switch between them, stream all the video, the desktops at the same time, but I could switch controls. Like I could control my Mac, and then I could switch over to Windows and control that and type away and click and whatever. Then I did WebRTC connection on the browser. Then I put on my Quest VR headset. I open a browser. I WebRTC to my central Node.js server. I use A-Frame, which is a JavaScript library on top of Three.js. I built a little 3D hollow table, kind of like Iron Man, which you use the hand tracking, and then you push buttons on the holo table, and you control all the individual desktops that you are streaming at any given moment. And then with your hands, you have a virtual keyboard, and then you can point to on the desktop, and it will translate all of that through WebRTC, through the browsers, down to Node, into mouse and keyboard commands. Did I finish it? No. Was it stupid hard? Yeah. Did I learn a million things? Absolutely. That project landed me not just attention, it also landed me a job. That and I can talk, like I could sit and talk about it for a long time on stream here, but that's not the point. Anyways, I think that's the way it should be done. And I think that is our solution to the current state of tech hiring. I think employers would benefit more from expecting more complexity, at least attempted complexity, from people they're interviewing, and developers would benefit as well. And one other thing that I think could be done on an employer side is, instead of, it's a hard pill to swallow if you're going to hire someone and put them on full time and pay them like that out of the gate. So yeah, there's a big risk that the employer is taking if the developer is not as good as they claim to be, for example. What you could do is you could contract potential employees. You don't even have to contract them full time. You could contract them for a few hours a week and do that for 2 to 4 weeks. And then at the end of that, if it goes well, hire them full time. And if you have your ducks in a row internally, you can throw some projects their way that are realistic to what you're building and see how they do. And then you don't, the risk is much lower. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks. I'm gonna peace out.